Let's get back in the trenches and continue the conversation on the Bearcats' defensive line, including one national college football expert who has some high expectations for them and the Bearcats' overall team in 2022.
Are Locked On Bearcats, your daily podcast on the Cincinnati Bearcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you so much for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen every day. It's free and available everywhere you get your podcasts and on YouTube, so don't forget to hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Bearcats YouTube channel, which I last checked, we are up to 239 subscribers and counting. Follow us to get an alert every time we drop a new episode as well. My name is Alex Frank, your host each and every day, and today I am joined by my colleague at AllBearcats and Sports Illustrated, Russ Heltman, to discuss all things the Bearcats' defensive line. We're going to dig deep in the trenches, and we're going to talk about a national college football expert who has some high praise for the entire Cincinnati Bearcats team heading in to 2022. Russ, first off with the defensive line, I feel like it's a position that's going through some changes this year. We talk about the cornerbacks, the running backs, and the quarterbacks. I think you can add defensive line to that list. Do you agree?
I would say so. Obviously, not as much turnover going into 2022 as you have losing your top two boundary cornerbacks in Ahmad Gardner and Kobe Bryant. But you got guys like Curtis Brooks on their way out, heading to camp with the Indianapolis Colts here in a couple weeks. You got Myjai Sanders out there in the desert with Arizona. So those are two huge productive pieces, especially pass rush wise, when you look at Curtis Brooks and his team leading sack total on the year that you're going to have to replace. But I do think they have the requisite experience to replace all of that production. And I think we'll see it from day one when they take on Wu Pig Sui down in Fayetteville.
Okay, so we know this defensive line is led by the big three, as I call them, Malik Van, Jowon Briggs, and Jabari Taylor. Can they replace the Russ? Because the biggest loss from last year's team, no question, is Curtis Brooks. If we're talking defensive line, it's Curtis Brooks. Can those three replace Brooks's production from last year?
I think so. And the guy I'm looking towards, and a guy that was named to the first team all AAC team preseason wise by Phil Steele just a few days ago, Jabari Taylor. He needs to come out and have a statement type of season. I would expect him, and fans should expect 6+ sacks out of him this year. He should be the featured pass rusher. He's able to rush on both sides of the defensive end positioning. He can go from the left. He can go from the right. He can take advantage of blind sides, whether they're left-handed passers or right-handed passers. So the fact that you have a guy as versatile as Taylor, who has the experience and has shown the ability to play on both sides of that defensive line, I think that's the versatility you need, especially when you think about having to replace nearly 10 sacks in going out the door in Myjai Sanders and Curtis Brooks.
Jabari Taylor, he was the guy, Russ, who arguably saved the season last year against Tulsa, if you remember, with that goal line stand, two goal line stands against Tulsa.
No, and he has, like, not that these guys don't have an edge to them, not that they don't come to play in the biggest moments, but Jabari Taylor has shown throughout his career, and definitively, like you mentioned, in the biggest moment of the season, I would say, the biggest opportunity for the entire house of cards to crumble, he was the guy making plays. And I think he's going to look at the situation that he has in front of him, look at the opportunity he has in front of him, where if he goes out and posts close to 10 sacks, has 50, 60 tackles on the season, is out there just disruptive all 12 games, all regular season long, then he can very well find himself in the NFL with an opportunity to make a roster next season. It's all right in front of Jabari Taylor, and he smells like a guy to me that is ready to go out and take it, not just let those opportunities keep coming his way.
Yeah, I have no doubt, and I'm excited to see what he can do this season, especially because it feels like, Russ, these three, led by Jabari Taylor, as you're mentioning, it feels like this is their time. It feels like this is their D line to anchor. Does it feel that way to you?
I would say so, and there's also a lot of great depth still. Like we mentioned, the depth that they're going to have to lean on to step up and replace guys like Myjai Sanders and Curtis Brooks and that three-headed monster we've already talked about, and Briggs, Taylor, and Van. But you got a guy like Noah Potter coming in, ready to prove himself, coming down the highway from Columbus out of Ohio State as the latest transfer to join the ranks here. You got a guy like Eric Phillips. You got a guy like Justin Wotley. You got a freshman in Mario Eugenio, who is a total wild card right now. Don't expect him to see a ton of playing time this year, but is the highest ranked defensive recruit in the history of the program that has been in the program so far. Dave McCullough obviously taking that crown with the latest commitment over the last couple of weeks. But Mario Eugenio, I'm sure, is going to want to not ride the bench his freshman year. He's coming in with something to prove and ready to show that it's not just the veteran leadership that's going to be getting all the snaps. So the fact that this room on the defensive line, from defensive end all the way to the interior defensive tackle position, is so deep, paired with, on the other side of the equation, such a deep offensive line, it gives you a lot of, what am I looking for, breathing room, so to speak, when you think about trying to reload and trying to get back and capture a third straight AAC title.
Saying that their margin for error is greater than maybe you would think. Their depth is certainly there. I think that's what you're trying to get at. So how good can this defensive line be? Because it definitely, Russ, has been a strength of the previous 4 Bearcats teams that have won 10-plus games 3 of the last 4 years. And last year, of course, going to the college football playoff. How good can this group be, in your opinion?
I don't know that they're going to be as good as last year or maybe even the year before last. I don't know that there's that top-end pass rushing talent or disruptive talent, but we're going to find out really soon here at Higher Ground. We're going to find out how much of a fall off there is once we start getting in some of these summer practices in about a month's time. So for me, it's kind of hard to predict how much they're going to compare to the prior year's teams. I would say the sack total will go down just a little bit overall. 39 team sacks on the year. I could see it being in the more lower 30s to mid 30s range, especially with a guy as heady as Joel DeBlanco going out the door, a veteran as heady as Curtis Brooks with as dynamic a move package on the inside that he can tap into and get enough of a push and enough of the opposing offensive lineman's hands off him to get those 7.5 sacks he had last year. So I do think there will be a little bit of a drop off, but I would still, and I think Bearcats fans are with me, expect this defensive line to be the strength of the team overall. That them, really, along with the offensive line, I would say are right there as the 2 strengths of the team, as opposed to last year when obviously the strength of the team definitively overall was the cornerback room, and especially on the defensive side.
It's still a program at the end of the day that is driven through its offensive and defensive lines in the trenches. Russ, coming up, you mentioned a lot of players behind the big 3. I'm going to ask you about one in particular, Eric Phillips, because I have some expectations, high expectations at that for him this season. We'll get to that here after a word from Rock Auto. That's what this episode is brought to you by. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for you to go to your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. So why do you want to endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry? Well, you have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. You can save time and money when using Rock Auto. It's a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Their prices are reliably low for every customer you need. Have everything you can need. They have brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. So go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. Russ, you mentioned the first player you mentioned in that last segment behind the big 3 of Briggs, Van, and Taylor is Eric Phillips. And he's a guy, when I think of him, I see a Deshaun Pace-like leap this season for Eric Phillips. What do you see from him this season? What do you make of him right now? Because like Pace, Colerain High School product, he's entering his 3rd season. Still a lot of play ahead of him. What do you see and make of him right now?
No doubt. Redshirted in 2019, 6'3", 265 pounds, has all the makings of being that next solid piece in this Bearcats defensive line rotation. Has only recorded 7 total tackles in his career. And he's a guy that I'm sure is chomping at the bit, waiting and was patiently waiting for some of those veteran talents to exit the door and maybe expected 1 or 2 more and to go ahead and close up shop on their college careers. But guys that had that extra year of eligibility did return. And even despite that, I still think, like you mentioned, he should be the number 1 option, I would imagine, on the interior of that defensive line in terms of the next man up in the rotation. You can't have the big fellas playing every single snap. So 20, 25, 30, 30, 33 snaps, somewhere in that range, 25 to 33 snaps a game for Eric Phillips should be hopefully what is on his docket if you're a Bearcats fan, because at this point of his career, going into his redshirt junior season with still a decent amount of eligibility remaining, the time is now if he is going to prove to be that 3-star hometown hero talent that you want developed and turned into a starting option or at least a rotational option on this defensive line. So when you think about Eric Phillips, he's a guy that I would expect, like you, to take, I don't know if I would say a Deshaun Pace leap, but I could see him taking a definitive leap compared to his sub 10 tackle showing over the first 2 years of him being on the field.
Yeah, and I think that all goes back to the guys that have been playing in front of the defensive linemen on this year's team. So who else do you see standing out on this defensive line? Somebody we're not talking about. I know you mentioned a lot of players in that last segment, but who in particular do you see breaking out that we're not maybe talking about right now?
To me, I think we have not given enough look at Jowon Briggs. To me, he's going to be the definitive linchpin for this defense. Just like Curtis Brooks was last year, I think the most underrated part of this defense, if Jowon Briggs plays up to his potential, like I think he will, really tapping into the chess pieces are all laid out for you, Jowon. You have all of the opportunity now coming over from Virginia a couple years ago. Now with that full starting role in your grasp, only had 9 solo tackles last year. I would expect that number to shoot way up in 2022. Was 42 tackles overall, did have 3 sacks, but I would expect 6 to 7 out of him if he reaches his true potential in this defensive line. Being that linchpin, center of the defense, type of havoc maker in that 3-3-5 with the sniper added on that kind of hybrid defense that Mike Tressel and Luke Fickell are trying to and have fully implemented here at UC. You need that player in the interior on an island to be able to dominate almost all 3 matchups, essentially, between the both guards and the center. You want him at least commanding a double team.
Yeah.
And if he really reaches his potential, we could see Jowon Briggs tapping into some triple teams this year. And if you got a guy triple teams, you're creating plenty of one-on-ones or open opportunities around the rest of the defensive line. Jowon Briggs, to me, is the skeleton key for this defense overall. It all starts right there with his head over the football. And if he can create a lot of havoc in 2022, then the rest of this defense is going to thrive because of it.
Are you saying that he is the defensive player under the most pressure this season?
I think so, because at this point, if you're Jowon Briggs coming back for this final year of eligibility, it's all on the line now. It is all out there on the line. It's a chance for him to really make a case to the NFL, really make a case to the rest of the evaluators across all 32 of those teams that he deserves to be a NFL type talent. You don't come back like Jowon Briggs came back unless you feel like you have something to prove and you're ready to kind of prove that on the field. And to me, Jowon Briggs does have that kind of pressure on him, but overall, it's tough for me, Alex. It's tough for me to say definitively that there is someone with the most pressure on them on this defense because it's such a man helping man. This thing happens, 1-2 things happens, and then the play is actually made type of defense. There's so many moving parts that have to work in congruence that it's hard for me to put one exact pressure-packed type of leverage on a player, but he's right up there, and he's a player in Jowon Briggs that doesn't have 1 year of eligibility left, obviously, but is a guy who I think will be going to the NFL if he has a huge season this year.
For someone who is a former, I believe, 3-star transfer from Virginia, he's played at the Power 5 level. I would say that there is some pressure on him to deliver this season. So, obviously, in addition to the defensive line, there are a handful of other Bearcats who made Phil Steele's all AAC teams, some of whom made Phil Steele's All-America teams. So we will get to that on the other side. Plus, there is a new sheriff deputy in town at the Big 12. We'll talk about him, and Russ, what you can tell us about the new commissioner of the Big 12 here after a word from Bet Online. You see, betonline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all of the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NHL playoffs, Stanley Cup final, and Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. And BetOnline.net remains the best spot, for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Russ Heltman, my colleague at AllBearcats and Sports Illustrated, joining me today. Russ, there is a new sheriff deputy in town. Brett, why do I still don't know how to pronounce his name? He is a town executive from Rock Nation. If I can pull this up here, his name is Brett Yormark. Brett Yormark, the new commissioner of the Big 12. Russ, you've written a little bit about him on AllBearcats. What can you tell us about him?
So Brett Yormark is the third straight hire by a Power 5 conference as commissioner to have no real direct ties to college athletics. And it's another sign that we are moving further and further away from the traditional college athletic structure. Is currently the COO of Rock Nation Entertainment, is stepping down from that role and will take the reins over from Bob Bowlesby in the Big 12 on August 1st, signed a 5-year deal. And you could argue this is the most impactful and biggest decision that will affect UC athletics over the next 10 years, considering how much money Brett Yormark is going to not necessarily be in control of, but be at the helm of, be kind of guiding, so to speak, because of the upcoming Big 12 television deal, which will be the final new television deal negotiated in this window among all 5 power conferences. And the fact that you have Oklahoma and Texas on their way out, it felt like to me that the conference needed to go big game hunting with this hire. They went and got one with a guy who has been at Rock Nation for 5-6 years now, has been an executive at the pro level as well. He was with the Brooklyn Nets, I believe. And when you look at the upcoming TV negotiations following the 2024-2025 college athletic seasons, the fact that you have so much hinging financially on what that number looks like, and a number that scarily will not look as good, you would guess, as it might have if they had retained OU and Texas, then you have to go get a guy like this. And he's a guy who has so many connections that it was reported by The Athletic that he literally, Bruce Feldman said, he just blew away everybody in the room with how many people he can bring in, how many people he can pull up on his phone, how many connections he has throughout the entertainment, throughout the sports, and throughout the business cultures and climates. So the fact that they were able to land this guy, I think, is a big win for the conference. And following George Kliavkoff coming over from MGM Entertainment, and former Minnesota Viking executive Kevin Warren coming over from the NFL side to the Pac-12 and Big Ten, it's just another instance where college sports is becoming a brand new, fully engrossed entertainment entity unto itself.
And I don't mean to throw this upon you, but I think you're frozen on the recording stream here, Russ. But that's okay. We still picked up that answer well. It's just kind of frozen right now, but that's okay. We'll carry on. For those of you watching, so it sounds like, Russ, this is a good move for the Big 12, right? Do you trust Brett Yormark to be able to get these big decisions right that are coming up?
I do, and yeah, something's going on with the connection. No video footage, but I think you can hear me crystal clear.
I can,
Anyways,
yes.
the fact that they brought in a guy like Brett Yormark, I think, is a home run. I don't have any qualms with this hire. I mean, it's kind of like hiring a head coach. It's like hiring a GM in football or GM in the NBA. You don't know what nobody knows how good they're actually going to be until they get in the job and get to actually attack it day to day. So the fact that he brings this type of resume and brings this type of Rolodex of clients and people he can tap into for advice and tap into for help and support, it gives me a lot of confidence that the Big 12, after taking a decent amount of time, being patient with the decision, made the right call with bringing in Brett Yormark. And we'll see what kind of television deal he can bring into the conference, because they'll say all these things about facilities and academics and yada, yada, yada. One thing matters when they're making this hire: getting the person that can bring them the most television revenue as possible, considering the uphill climb they have, not allowing or not bringing Texas and Oklahoma with them on the next 10-year contract.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go to some football news, some more football news to wrap up the show. I'm looking at Phil Steele's preseason projections. You recently wrote an article on our website, AllBearcats, about them, and it's high and ambitious. I mean, I'm looking at Deshaun Pace as a second-team All-American, not just All-AAC. I mean, this is a guy who was All-AAC honorable mention last year, and yet Phil Steele is thinking All-American for the third-year linebacker out of Coleraine High School. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on just these absolute? I mean, Phil Steele, it seems to me, Russ, like he doesn't think the Bearcats are going to take a step back, maybe at all.
Right, 17 guys overall cracked the entire All AAC team that they went through. I think they went four teams deep on the All AAC squad. So obviously, that's not going to be what it actually is when they come out with the honorees at the end of this upcoming season. But it just goes to show the depth this team still has bringing back, and especially a guy in Deshaun Pace, who it seems to me, Alex, that he's had some conversations, Phil Steele has, around the country and with people close to this program, thinking that it's time to inject some rocket fuel into SS Deshaun Pace out here, because he's going to be in that premier playmaking role as the sniper in this defense. He led the team in interceptions last year with 4. I wouldn't expect them to take him out of any of those scenarios and take him away from those spots in 2022. He could have 4+ interceptions once again. And where I think he's really going to make an even bigger impact is the sack total. Only had half sack in 2021, but was 4th on the team in overall tackles with 95. I think he's going to lead the team in tackles. I think he could be their 2nd or 3rd highest sack total. And I think he could once again lead the team in interceptions. This guy is that talented. He's entering the prime of his college career, so to speak. And this is the time when Deshaun Pace can blow up the AAC, have a dominant season, and go on to be that next great defensive player that the Bearcats put in the NFL. I haven't seen him on a ton of draft boards so far. He's kind of not really any Bearcats I've seen worked up the draft board so far, but this is a player in Deshaun Pace who obviously Phil Steele has a lot of confidence in the expansion of his role coming that player's way in 2022.
It's amazing. And on next week's shows, tomorrow's show, I'm going to give 7 things that need to happen for the Bearcats football and men's basketball programs on the 1 year away date from going to the Big 12. Next week, I'm going to hit on the linebackers, and I'm going to tell you all, including you, Russ, and I'm sure I'll have you on again next week, why Deshaun Pace is my favorite player on this year's team. Because his meteoric rise last year, and as a Cincinnati kid, it is unbelievable that the Bearcats have once again a player of his caliber in their program. Russ, I apologize once again for the network connection. Hopefully the video looks better once it gets posted to YouTube. But Russ Heltman from AllBearcats, it's always a pleasure to have you on, and I'll look forward to having you on again here potentially next week.
Of course, my man. Would love to do it. Love making these newly cemented weekly appearances. It's a lot of fun, and we are getting closer and closer, Alex, to football and basketball returning.
We are, and I was just thinking yesterday how eventually we're gonna have a three-man preview show on this podcast. You, me, and our good friend James Rapine, our colleague at AllBearcats, will have a preview show of the season once that rolls around, and then weekly appearances from you throughout the season. So, Russ, good to talk to you, and best wishes to you and your family.
Love it. Thanks, Alex. I'll be ready. Have a great week.
Absolutely. You as well. Russ Heltman from AllBearcats and Sports Illustrated joining me. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Frankie_Natty with 2 N's and an ATI. You can follow me on Instagram, AlexFrank9_, and email me at alex3frank@gmail.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the Locked On Bearcats YouTube channel, which at last check, we are up to 240. So that means one person subscribed during the show. So that's good. During this recording, rather. So we're up to 240 subscribers and counting. You could be the next. Subscribe and follow us to get an alert every time we drop a new episode. Thanks, as always, for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen of every day. Now go make your second listen Locked On Big 12. Josh Neighbors, your host, and the local experts of Locked On take you across the league in 30 minutes. Locked On Big 12, your second listen. That's Locked On Big 12. For the Locked On Bearcats podcast, I'm Alex Frank. Have a great rest of your Thursday, the final day of June. Happy birthday to my sister, Sorella, in Denver, Colorado. 21st. Although they're in, what's the city called? Vail, Colorado, I think, tonight. Anyway, they're celebrating. My other sister, my sister's out there celebrating with her. This is good times, man. Really good times. And I wish all them the best out in Denver. And I wish all you the best here in Cincinnati, Macon, Georgia, Middle Georgia, Atlanta, wherever. Have a great rest of your day, and I will be back tomorrow on the first day of July. That means tomorrow there's going to be fewer days left in the year than have already been passed in this year. Oh, man, time flies. We're getting closer to football season, though. That's a good thing. I'm Alex Frank for the Locked On Bearcats podcast. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.